You think when you die, your brain just goes dark, switches off like a light. But it doesn't. In the final seconds, something else happens instead. Not a shutdown, but a surge. And in 2022, scientists caught it happening in real time, completely by accident. In February 2022, an 87-year-old man in Estonia was hooked up to an EEG machine. Doctors were monitoring him for epilepsy, nothing life threatening. Then, without warning, he had a heart attack and died right there on the monitor. Nobody planned for this, but the machine kept recording 900 seconds of brain activity centered on the exact moment of his death. For 30 seconds before his heart stopped and 30 seconds after, his brain did something researchers had only ever seen in living, thinking people. Rhythm burst of electrical activity called gamma oscillations, the exact pattern your brain produces when you're remembering something or dreaming. This wasn't an isolated glitch. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan had already recorded the same thing in dying rats. In the seconds after their heart stopped, the animal's brain didn't go quiet. They lit up with the same gamma pattern, even more intensely than during normal waking life. The regions most active during this surge are the same regions responsible for recalling memories and constructing vivid mental imaginary. The same machinery that runs every time you dream or replay a memory in detail. Here's what should genuinely unsettle you. This pattern doesn't require the heart to be beating. It doesn't require the lungs to be breathing. The brain can produce this organized, structured activity for up to 30 seconds after the body has, by every chemical measure, already died. Some researchers believe this surge could be the biological source of what's called a life review. The vivid, fast moving memory replay reported by people who have been resuscitated after a cardiac arrest across nearly every culture on earth. And here is the detail that should really stop you. This isn't some rare phenomenon confined to one hospital bed in Estonia. Surveys suggest close to 1 in 5 people who survive cardiac arrest report some version of this experience, vivid, structured, and remembered clearly from a period when their brain was supposed to be off. Here is what almost nobody says out loud in these stories. Nobody actually knows what this surge means from the inside. It might be the last flicker of a functioning nervous system doing exactly what it always does, retrieving memory and stitching together as a narrative, the same way it does every single night while you dream. Or it might be something closer to a final involuntary your thoughts, your own stored memories played all at once faster than real time. Researchers are careful not to claim more than the data supports. Nobody knows from brain activity alone whether there is a subjective experience attached to it or just electrical noise that happens to resemble one. What makes it stranger is how consistent the reported experiences are across cultures that never had any contact with each other. A tunnel, a light, a sense of vivid clarity, a rapid replay of scenes from earlier in life. These details show up in accounts from radically different countries, religions, and eras, long before anyone could have compared notes. One leading theory ties this to a chemical spike, neurochemicals released under extreme psychological stress, similar to compounds studied in other altered states research. Another point to oxygen deprivation itself, producing a predictable pattern of a visual and cognitive effects, almost like a shared failure mode, built into how brains runs out of power. Neither theory is fully proven, both are still being tested. But the deepest implication here is not about anyone that's, it's about what this search suggests about conscious itself. For most of modern medicine, death has been treated as a hard line, a moment, a switch alive on one side and gone on the other. This research suggests that the line is blurrier than thought. Consciousness, or at least something that looks a great deal like it from the outside, may not end the instant the heart stops. It may fade, organized, patterned, briefly, more active than during ordinary walking life before it gets. This is already changing how some hospitals and bioethics talk about the exact moment a person should be considered gone. If the person is still producing something that closely resembles memory and cognitive minutes after clinical death, the question of when someone has actually died becomes less obvious than a flat line on a monitor. None of this proves an afterlife, and no serious researchers studying this claim that it does. But it does mean the old, simple story the brain switches off and that's it. was always incomplete. So think about the 87-year-old man in Estonia hooked up to a machine for a completely unrelated reason on what turned out to be the last day of his life. Nobody expected to record anything meaningful that day. And yet, in his final seconds, his brain produced the same pattern it used every single time he ever remembered someone he loved. You don't get to choose whether this happens to you, but you can know now that if it does, your brain isn't simply shutting off in silence. Somewhere in that final surge, it may be doing exactly what it always did the best. Here is the reframe though. You don't need this to be a proof of anything beyond the body to find it meaningful. Even the most clinical stripped down version of this story, no afterlife is required, no soul, just neurons. The last documented act of a dying brain resembles remembering, not forgetting. Nobody knows exactly what, if anything, is experienced in that final surge, but the data suggests that if your brain gets a last act, it doesn't reach for panic or blankness or static. It only reaches for memory. What that means to you is up to you.